He emphasized that marking Diwali with the military enhances the festival's significance, stating that no one has the courage to look towards Kutch because of the bravery of the forces. Prime Minister Modi also hailed the spirit of Atmanirbhar Bharat that has made the forces more self-reliant. Prime Minister Modi raised the entire matter when it comes to the security of the nation's border, praising the resilience of the soldiers in challenging situations and highlighted Gujarat's coastline as vital ground to deter security threats. The Diwali celebration serves as a powerful reminder, ladies and gentlemen, of the unity and dedication of India's armed forces, showcasing their commitment to the nation.
21वीं सदी की जरूरतों को देखते हुए आज हम अपनी सेनाओं को, हमारे सुरक्षा बलों को आधुनिक संसाधनों से लैस कर रहे हैं। हम हमारी सेनाओं को विश्व की सबसे आधुनिक मिलिट्री फोर्सेस की कतार में खड़ा कर रहे हैं। हमारे इन प्रयासों का आधार है रक्षा क्षेत्र में आत्मनिर्भर भारत। अभी कुछ ही दिन पहले यही गुजरात के वडोदरा में C295 फैक्ट्री का उद्घाटन हुआ है। आज विक्रांत जैसा मेड इन इंडिया एयरक्राफ्ट कैरियर देश के पास है। आज भारत में अपनी सबमरीन बनाई जा रही है। आज हमारा तेजस फाइटर प्लेन वायुसेना की ताकत बन रहा है। हमारा अपना 5th जनरेशन फाइटर एयरक्राफ्ट बनाने का काम भी शुरू हो चुका है। पहले भारत की पहचान हथियार मंगाने वाले देश की थी। आज भारत दुनिया के कितने ही देशों को डिफेंस उपकरण एक्सपोर्ट कर रहा है।
सर्करी के पास कच्छ की धरती पर देश की सेनाओं के साथ, सीमा सुरक्षा बल के साथ आपके बीच दीपावली, ये मेरा सौभाग्य है। आप सभी को दीपावली की बहुत बहुत बधाई।
जब मैं दीपावली का पर्व आप लोगों के बीच मनाता हूं तो मेरी दीपावली की मिठास कई गुना बढ़ जाती है। और इस बार तो ये दीपावली भी बहुत खास है। आपको लगेगा हर दीपावली का अपना महत्व होता है, इस बार खास क्या है? खास है अयोध्या में प्रभु राम 500 साल बाद फिर से अपने भव्य मंदिर में विराजमान हुए हैं।
And beyond the long-standing tradition of Prime Minister Modi celebrating Diwali with the forces, he also participated in Ekta Diwas in Kevadia in his home state of Gujarat, commemorating the birth anniversary of India's first Home Minister, the Iron Man of India, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. The Prime Minister administered the Ekta Diwas pledge and witnessed the Ekta Diwas parade, which comprised of 16 marching contingents from state police forces, the Central Armed Police Forces and the NCC. There was a special demonstration from the NSG, BSF and CRPF, including the grand Surya Kiran flypast by the Indian Air Force. Now, in a veiled attack at the opposition, Prime Minister Modi said that divisive politics are at play in the nation and appealed to citizens to remain united amid attacks on India's unity. Prime Minister Modi also assured the implementation of one nation, one election, as well as the Uniform Civil Code, which has irked the opposition camp.
अब हम वन नेशन वन इलेक्शन पर काम कर रहे हैं। आज आतंकियों के आकाओं को पता है कि भारत को नुकसान पहुंचाया तो भारत उन्हें छोड़ेगा नहीं। अर्बन नक्सलियों के इस गठजोड़ को, इनके गठजोड़ को हमें पहचानना ही होगा। जो लोग समाज को बांटना चाहते हैं, उन्हें देश की एकता अखर रही है। हमें ऐसे लोगों से, ऐसी विचारों से, ऐसी प्रवृत्ति से, ऐसी वृत्ति से पहले से भी ज्यादा सावधान होने की जरूरत है।
What Modi tells, he won't do it because unless in parliament it comes, he has to take everybody into confidence. Then only this will happen. But it is impossible. It is impossible. One nation, one election, impossible. Because several states, several problems, and regional parties are there. But simply he is telling everything which is not possible. When he can't give 2 crores employment, everybody which is in his hand, he won't do. He told 15 lakhs I will give everybody. Where is that money? He can't do. Whatever doable, whatever he can do, he is not doing it. But simply these things are telling just to fool the people.
बाबा ने और भारतीय जनता पार्टी ने जो हमारे मान्य पर्व है उसका भी इन्होंने राजनीतिकरण कर दिया है। लाख भारतीय जनता पार्टी के लोग प्रयास करें देश को टूटने का, बांटने का और डिवाइड एंड रूल की पॉलिसी अख्तियार करने का, वो चलने वाला नहीं है। देश महान है, महान रहेगा।
वन नेशन वन इलेक्शन कब इम्प्लीमेंट होगा और उसकी क्या सूरत होगी, उसकी क्या शक्ल होगी, अभी तक ना उसका ब्लूप्रिंट है ना उसका बिल है। प्रधानमंत्री सिर्फ हवा में बात कर रहे हैं। उससे डेमोक्रेसी मजबूत नहीं होगी। अगर देश के अंदर माइनॉरिटी सरकारें चलेंगी, जिस मुख्यमंत्री के साथ असेंबली में अक्सरियत नहीं है, जिस प्रधानमंत्री के पास पार्लियामेंट में अक्सरियत नहीं है, और वो सरकार को चलाते रहेंगे, तो डेमोक्रेसी मजबूत होगी कि कमज़ोर होगी। अगर आप यूनिफॉर्म सिविल कोड को कह रहे हैं तो पार्लियामेंट के अंदर अभी तक तो आपने कोई मूव किया नहीं है। स्टेट गवर्नमेंट्स के अंदर उत्तराखंड में अलहदा बन रही है, गोवा के अंदर अलहदा है, यूपी वाले अलहदा बनाना चाहते हैं। तो ये यूनिफॉर्म सिविल कोड थोड़ी होगा, ये तो 28 स्टेट्स के 28 कोड बन जाएंगे। एक कोड कहाँ बन पाएगा? तो प्रधानमंत्री जो चाहते हैं वो बोलते हैं, जिसका कोई मतलब नहीं होता।
उन्होंने सही कहा कि एक रहेंगे तो नेक रहेंगे, एक रहेंगे तो सेफ रहेंगे। परंतु ये दुर्भाग्यपूर्ण बात है, जब आज कोई एकता की बात करता है तो एक देश में ऐसा गिरोह है, एक ऐसी राजनीतिक जमात है जो इसे सांप्रदायिक कहती है। बताइए कि एक होना सांप्रदायिक है, पर यह वही जमात है जो वोट जिहाद को सेकुलर कहती है। जब कहा जाता है कि हिंदू या भारत के समाज को भाषा में, कभी जाति में बांटो, तो उसको तो सेकुलर कहती है, और जब कहा जाता है कि भारत के लोग एक हो जाओ, तब उसको सांप्रदायिक घोषित किया जाता है। यही दिखाता है कि इस गिरोह की, इस जमात की मंशा ये है कि भारत बंटता रहे, और जैसे ही भारत बटे, भारत के दुश्मनों को उस भारत के खिलाफ किस प्रकार से षड्यंत्र करने का मौका मिले, ये उनके मानसिकता में, मस्तिष्क में रहता है।
And it's a happy Diwali at the line of actual control as well, ladies and gentlemen. In a major development, the disengagement process has been completed at the friction points of Depsang and Demchok. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh has confirmed the disengagement of troops. Now, top defence sources have confirmed that patrolling at traditional points in Depsang and Demchok is also underway. To mark this development, soldiers from both sides even exchanged sweets at the Chushul-Moldo border today. According to a top army source, troops, tents and temporary structures have been removed from contested areas, adding that dialogue will continue at the level of local commanders. This development comes 4 years since the Galwan clash, where sustained military and diplomatic engagement has now eased tensions at the line of actual control.
बॉर्डर रिलेटेड एक बहुत बड़ी डेवलपमेंट हुई है। भारत और चीन के बीच यलेसी पर कुछ क्षेत्रों में अपने कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स को रिजॉल्व करने में यानी सुलझाने में डिप्लोमेटिक और मिलिट्री लेवल पर लंबे समय से बात चल रही थी। हम सबके लंबे प्रयासों के बाद यलेसी पर ग्राउंड सिचुएशन को रिजॉल्व करने में हम आपस में एक कंसेंसस पर पहुंच गए हैं और उसमें कामयाबी हम सबको हासिल हुई है।
In regard of the very important meeting between President Xi and Prime Minister Modi just now, I had made a very, briefing in my speech about their important visit. Now that the two leaders have reached many important understandings, that will be the guidelines for the further development of our relations of our two countries. And I just hope that under the guidance of this consensus, our relations will be moving forward smoothly in the future, and our relations will not be restricted or interrupted by specific disagreements between our two sides. Because as two neighboring countries, it's quite natural we have some differences. The most important thing is how to handle and solve these differences.
Meanwhile, the city of Ayodhya was bathed in light on Wednesday, marking the first Diwali since the inauguration of the Grand Ram Mandir. CNN News 18's Anand Narasimhan spoke with singer Kailash Kher, who talked about the influence of Lord Ram on the world and the spiritual importance of this moment for people across the globe.
राममय है कि नहीं आप?
तो राममय तो पूरा भारत है, बल्कि पूरा विश्व में कहूँ तो है, क्योंकि पूरे विश्व में राम भक्त रहते हैं, सनातन को मानने वाले, जीने वाले लोग रहते हैं, और जो सनातन को जीते हैं वो मानवता को जीते हैं, और जो मानवता को अपनाने वाले लोग हैं पूरी दुनिया में, उनके लिए ये सच में बहुत बड़े मनोहारी पल हैं कि भगवान राम का जहाँ मंदिर बन चुका है, रामलला स्थापित हो गए हैं, प्राण प्रतिष्ठा हो गई है, उसके बाद की जो पहली दिवाली है, ये अपने आप में स्वप्न जैसे साकार होने जैसा है। तो क्योंकि देखिए, भावनाओं के प्रति, उमंगों के प्रति उनको बताया नहीं जा सकता, उनको तो महसूस किया जा सकता है, और आस्था जहाँ जुड़ी हो तो वो तो दुनिया की सबसे बड़ी बात होती है।
जी, राम के धाम में आज 28 लाख दिए जल रहे हैं, तो राम के धाम का जो एंथम जो आपने गाया था वो तो सुनना बनता है। कैलाश जी, आप हमारे साथ जुड़े हों और मैं आपसे सुर छेड़ने का आग्रह ना करूं, ऐसा तो हो नहीं सकता।
अजी मैं तो राम ही राम भजूरी मेरे राम, राम ही पार लगावेंगे, जल थल गगन मंडल में राम, राम ही पार लगावेंगे।
क्या बात है।
तन मोरा राम, मन मोरा राम, तन मोरा राम, मन मोरा राम, मोरा कण कण हो जी राम ही राम, राम ही पार लगावेंगे। यानी तन राम, मन राम और कण कण भी भारत का तो क्या, रोम रोम इस पृथ्वी पर जितने भी जीवित आत्माएं हैं वो राममय हो रखे हैं। और ये बहुत ही उमंगों से भरा क्षण है जब विश्व रिकॉर्ड भी बन रहे हैं और न जाने क्या क्या रिकॉर्ड बन रहे हैं। 500 वर्ष में पहली बार दिवाली मन रही है सच में।
So it was a grand display of Astha in Ayodhya, the first Diwali since the inauguration of the Grand Ram Mandir. We're going to take a quick break now, ladies and gentlemen. But once again, on behalf of the entire team here at CNN News 18, a very happy Diwali.
You said in 2024, your prediction was that Kamala Harris would win.
I defied all the pollsters, all the pundits in predicting Donald Trump in 2016.
Being Trump, he couldn't stop himself from being vulgar about it and talking about what Arnold Palmer looks like in the locker room when he's showering.
If undecided voters decide to vote, they break against the incumbent, which here would be Kamala Harris.
Why is this contest so close? It's literally a knife's edge.
If I had to bet, I would bet on Trump. Harris will win the popular vote.
Donald Trump is perhaps in a good position to win the presidency.
एकता दिवस पर सभी देशवासियों को बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। साथियों, इस बार का राष्ट्रीय एकता दिवस अद्भुत संयोग लेकर आया है। एक तरफ आज हम एकता का उत्सव मना रहे हैं, वहीं दूसरी तरफ दीपावली का भी पावन पर्व है। दीपावली दीपों के माध्यम से पूरे देश को जोड़ती है, पूरे देश को प्रकाशमय कर देती है। और अब तो दीपावली का पर्व भारत को दुनिया से भी जोड़ रहा है। अनेक देशों में इसे राष्ट्रीय उत्सव की तरह मनाया जा रहा है। मैं देश और दुनिया में बसे सभी
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and a very happy Diwali from the entire team here at CNN News 18. But amid the India-Canada tensions, Canadian opposition MP Pierre Poilievre suddenly called off a Diwali event that he was supposed to celebrate with the Indian diaspora at Parliament Hill in Ottawa. Now, CNN News 18's Akanksha Swaroop spoke to the president of the Overseas Friends of India-Canada, who expressed disappointment with the Canadian parties over this matter.
Mr. Shiv Bhaskar, thank you so much for joining in on CNN News 18. Let me have it on record straight from the horse's mouth. What exactly happened? How were you informed about the cancellation of Diwali celebrations, and did you receive any explanation for the cancellation?
No, so basically we had received a one-line email from the office of the Tar Doherty, Member of Parliament, which basically said the event was cancelled on the one that was supposed to take place on October 30th. And happy Diwali. And then, I sent to all my members the cancellation notice, and they were all asking for explanation. I sent another email back saying, hey, can you provide some explanation why the event was canceled? I never received any explanation.
Mr. Bhaskar, how do you assess the decision to cancel the event, which has been held for 23 years, something you just highlighted? I know in your letter to Pierre Poilievre, you talk about how racism and discrimination are thriving in Canada. Why do you say so?
Well, you see, the thing is, I mean, Deepak Broy put his heart in it and he made it work for so many years. So when they sent us a cancellation, and it was a one-line cancellation. So why was it canceled? What was the reason? We can only speculate that because the only thing that's going on right now is the the little disagreements between the Canadian and the Indian government and all the underlying currents that are going on. So we were never given any explanation, but we were told that the event was canceled on the advice of the office of the leader of the opposition. So we don't know who canceled it. I cannot say Pierre, because I don't know that. All I know, it came from his office.
All right. Now, so far, the critics of Justin Trudeau have accused him of supporting the Khalistan agenda as part of his appeasement politics, and much hope has been placed on Pierre Poilievre in terms of how the India-Canada relationship could be salvaged and see an upturn if Poilievre were to be the next Prime Minister. Is that true, given that he clearly doesn't wish to be seen at celebrations of a Hindu festival and doesn't want to be associated with Indo-Canadians?
No, I don't think that is the case necessarily, because he was there last year and he was there before that. Last year he was the first time he was the leader of the opposition, right? Now, he only won his leadership 2 years ago. So I don't think you can say that he's not a friend of the Hindus, but whatever reason they canceled it this time, for whatever the reason was, we don't know. We can only speculate, as we said. But remember, back in 2015, when Prime Minister India came to Canada, at that time, the Prime Minister was Stephen Harper, also of the Conservative Party. And at that time, the relationships were very good. And we almost had the trade deal signed. I think there was just disagreement between one or two chapters, but all those deals were worked. And then after that, things just went downhill. I mean, I think after that 2018 or 2019 visit of Justin Trudeau, when he went to India, things just after that have never looked better, and they've just gone haywire. It's the best way to put it.
And that's all we have to pack in on the show, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, a very happy Diwali from the entire team here at CNN News 18. We're going to take a quick break now. More news and updates on the other side.
India's only news channel with a global outlook will bring you coverage of the most anticipated American election in recent times. I'll be live from Washington, D.C.
A bitterly divided America will have to choose between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Watch me bring you updates from Trump's business staff in New York.
India is closely watching this US election like never before.
Join me in getting that American feel ahead of this high-octane clash.
The great American election of 2024 will have a direct impact on New Delhi. Watch me decode the ramifications of a Kamala or Trump presidency on India.
Two raging wars, a deeply polarized world, and trade routes at peril. What will the newly elected leader of the free world bring to the table?
From Washington, D.C., watch me spearhead the coverage along with my colleagues. Race for the White House, only on CNN News 18.
एकता दिवस पर सभी देशवासियों को बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। साथियों, इस बार का राष्ट्रीय एकता दिवस अद्भुत संयोग लेकर आया है। एक तरफ आज हम एकता का उत्सव मना रहे हैं, वहीं दूसरी तरफ दीपावली का भी पावन पर्व है। दीपावली दीपों के माध्यम से पूरे देश को जोड़ती है, पूरे देश को प्रकाशमय कर देती है और अब तो दीपावली का पर्व भारत को दुनिया से भी जोड़ रहा है। अनेक देशों में इसे राष्ट्रीय उत्सव की तरह मनाया जा रहा है। मैं देश और दुनिया में बसे सभी भारतीयों को, भारत के शुभचिंतकों को दीपावली की अनेक अनेक शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। साथियों, इस बार का एकता दिवस एक और वजह से भी विशेष है। आज से सरदार पटेल का 150वां जन्म जयंती वर्ष शुरू हो रहा है। आने वाले 2 वर्षों तक देश सरदार पटेल की 150वीं जन्म जयंती का उत्सव
Namaste, Jai Hind and festive greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It's a festive week and that's why you see me coming off, not in the traditional take 3 attire. So I must say that right at the top. But this is also a very special edition because we have a special guest with us. Palki Sharma Upadhyay, Managing Editor, First Post is with us. With of course the usual suspects, Zaka Jacob, Managing Editor, CNN News 18 and Rahul Shivshankar, Consulting Editor here with the News 18 network. And what we're going to talk about is got nothing to do with India, but it's got to do a lot with a nation whose elections will decide what happens in its equations with India. Perhaps there's been so much drama also already in the run-up. WAPO has Washington Post has its editorial board resigning because they will not endorse. Jeff Bezos is saying, let's just say balance. What's all this going on? Zaka Jacob, the US elections is what we're going to talk about. Zaka, Palki and Rahul. No, we stick to some traditions. We'll start with you and then we'll bring her here. Okay.
Well, look, it's a very close election. It's probably the closest election in a generation, closest election since Bush v. Gore. And I think a lot is at stake. I think what you're seeing is really a sort of America at this inflection point. They need to decide which way they're headed, not just for the next 4 years. I think this election will decide which way the country is headed for maybe the next decade. It's not just for political issues. Of course, there's immigration, there's economy, there's abortion, there's a whole bunch of political issues. But I think even on a cultural plane, this election in many ways will decide the direction of America. And obviously that has down the road consequences for every country in the world. There are 2 wars happening right now. The next president is of immense consequence in what happens to the trajectory of those 2 wars. It's hugely important and consequential for India, depending on who is the next president. If Trump is president, how does that affect India? If Harris is president, how does that affect India? And if Harris wins, which right now looks, a little more difficult than it was, let's say a month ago or a couple of months ago, she will be making history as the first woman president of the US. So it is a very, very consequential election.
Yeah, but the tides seem to have changed, turned, Palki. And interesting, people are asking, kaun jeet raha hai? And they say, what do you mean, Mahayuti or Mahaghadi? And they say, no, Trump and Biden. So that's how much a conversation point it is.
Yes,
your thoughts?
And given the experience that people who predict election results have had in the recent past in India and elsewhere, it's going to be hard to stick your neck out. But at this point, like Zaka said, that the lead that Kamala Harris had overall nationally has shrunk. And if you look at multiple polls, the swing states still remain extraordinarily tight. But overall, the national lead, and according to, I think, the Wall Street Journal, Trump is polling ahead. So it is very tight. The interesting point is that the gap between Trump and Hillary Clinton was much wider in 2016, and she was way ahead, and yet he won. So this time it's going to be, and we're seeing a lot of variables here. The early voters are going in much bigger numbers. So I think that Trump has, in a way, swayed the conversation to his advantage in the last
What's
few
the
weeks.
difference between the Trump of 2016 and the Trump of 2024?
He sounds more obnoxious. I think he knows that he's been there, he's done that, and he can do it again. He knows the game, he knows how to run the system, he is more experienced. So yeah, and the Trump of 2024 looks better poised than the Trump of 2016 did, I think.
Why is the average person on the street, conversation, who understands even or following a semblance of what is happening in the US says, Trump आएगा तो इंडिया के लिए बेटर है?
I believe that it's a barometer that will test America's commitment to democratic, social and economic progressivism. Okay, it's very simple. I think that's the point that Zaka was sort of starting off. That is that will American government and state play a bigger and more intrusive role in people's lives? Already, the abortion debate seems to suggest that the American state wants to play a very intrusive role when it comes to women and their role in society. Will the polity become more illiberal with the way the conversation is, shaping up as Mr. Trump is shaping it?
If they get any more illiberal, because it's
That's
just a
right.
two-party system, and they're...
What about the march towards gender equality? I was watching a fascinating discussion just the other day with Fareed Zakaria and somebody that you put on 8 o'clock, and it was fascinating because they were talking about two definitions of what is now to be a man in America, right? So there's the liberal definition and there is the liberal Republican definition, then there is the hardcore Trump Hulk Hogan definition.
The
So it's very interesting.
MAGA definition.
Yeah,
MAGA
exactly.
definition.
Is America ready for a woman to lead it? And I was talking to my wife, who happens to be an American and a journalist, and she said for her, this election is really about reframing misogyny in American society. There's a deep strain of misogyny. Miss Clinton, that is, lost because she was a woman. Here, what do you have? You have an Asian African American woman, a minority within a minority. So forget about her skin color, there's also the gender, and she doesn't have the advantage of either being popular amongst a segment of white Protestant WASP voters, and neither does she have the male African vote lining up behind her. So you can imagine the problem there.
The woman card, feminists,
Yeah.
all of that is okay. That there should be, women should come into politics, and but there has to be some weight for merit. Now, do you believe that Kamala Harris is a far better, far more astute politician than a Hillary Clinton?
That's a slippery slope because Trump does not come with immense merit either, but
correct.
people believe that he can get things done. Having said that, I agree. I'm not sure that America is ready for a woman to be president, let alone a brown black woman to become president. And this whole pitch that that the Harris team has come up with, the threat to democracy, is the worst idea, because that is not something that resonates with people at a time when there's a cost of living crisis, at a time when they're looking at more existential issues that affect them on a daily basis. Multiple polls have shown that this pitch comes at the bottom after immigration, after your economy, after the whole alien thing, abortion. It is at the bottom, and this is what they're leaning on, and that's not a great. So to answer your question, yes, merit does count, and I think Americans have two bad choices, honestly.
True, but I'm also...
Can I?
Go ahead.
One of the first thing you said is you don't think America is ready for a woman president. Why?
Because look at what Trump stands for, right? And he's talking about the whole Puerto Rico debate and the kind of statements, racist. And yet, you had to bring in a Barack Obama to tell the Hispanics and the black men to come out and vote. So the debate today is not whether they will vote, whether they will come out and vote at all or sit out of this election. And that says a lot about a community that is clearly being villainized by one of the contenders.
For this nation to hold sway over the entire world's discourse, be it trade, be it power, be it across, if you look back at its own societal progression, they call themselves liberal, they call themselves land of the free, home of the brave, etc., etc. But are they really land of the free, home? That's another question. The other thing is this politics. To what changed between Biden stepping out, Kamala Harris coming in, overnight, the alphabet to everyone else backing Kamala Harris, she's running up the numbers, and now suddenly Trump...
What changed is obviously, Biden was clearly not in a position either physically or mentally to run this country or the responsibilities that come with it. I think that was very apparent. He was in a state of advanced cognitive decline.
and that's very, very,
But that's
very
been for
apparent.
a while, no, Zaka. But
Yeah,
they didn't
fair
change
enough.
him away.
I mean,
Why did they wait till the late?
He won the nomination process,
yeah.
and generally, I mean, nobody gives up power, even if you're 81.
Correct.
He won the nomination process, but I think the debate really sort of did him in, and he realized that, look, I'm not in a position to go through this hellhole, this grind of the campaign. So he stepped down. Now, whether Harris was the best candidate or not, that's a debate. That's a fair debate to have. I don't think, but I think that's water under the bridge. She is the candidate of the Democratic Party. In terms of, is America ready for a woman president? I wish it were.
Yeah.
I really wish it were ready for a woman president. Not because of anything else, but simply because of the fact that, today, I think almost a third of Congress members, both in the Senate and in the House, are women. So I think, deservedly so, America should have a woman commander-in-chief. Again, the question is Harris the best candidate for it? I don't know. That's something we'll know on
what I'm trying to tell you, ask you guys, all of you, is that compared to the Republicans and the Dems there, the Dems seem to have a better narrative to speak about, and especially with what happened with the Capitol being invaded and all of that, and Trump going out and crying and bickering, and nobody wanted Trump and everybody was busy abusing, saying anybody but him. But today he's got the numbers on his way. So where did the Dems go wrong? What is it that they didn't do right over the last 5 years? And or is it just the same principle that it's very rare that America repeats its party, and in the two-party system it keeps flip-flopping? That's not happened. In the past there have been successive terms.
Obama's had 2 terms consecutively, Bush had 2 terms consecutively, Reagan had 2, Clinton had 2. No, I think the economy, again, this is the dichotomy, right? The top line numbers all suggest that the economy is on steroids. I mean, the stock markets are at record highs, job numbers are at record highs, but the average American is not feeling that. The average American feels worse off today economically than 4 years ago. The first thing they say is grocery bills. Fuel costs, these have all gone up. And I think ultimately all elections are about that. I mean, there are, even in India, you can talk about caste and religion and all of that. Ultimately, I think people vote for whether they are better off today than they were.
Whether they feel better off, whether they are better off or not. For you, what are you watching in this election?
Geopolitically, I think this election is going to be very, very consequential, because look at the larger picture here. You have a China that is rising and that wants to replace the Americans. You have a Russia that is engaged in a war and is also supporting anti-American forces in West Asia. You have an India that is talking about multipolarity. And if you have Donald Trump at the helm, who says that we will only honor the commitments that we made as long as you're ready to pay your bills, even to NATO, it completely changes the picture. If he's in power for 4 more years in a scenario like this, then we will see whether America is going to still be seen as a leader of the West specifically. A lot of European powers and NATO members are already talking about Trump-proofing their policies. The Ukrainians are very, very nervous about what this election may throw up. So if Trump comes back to power, it is going to change a lot of equations and throw a lot of things in disarray, and we'll have to see.
So you think he'll pull out of Ukraine, Rahul? What is Trump going to do? Is he going to pull out of Ukraine? Is he going to tell Israel, stop firing those missiles, get back in, I'm not bankrolling it anymore?
No, I mean, he's very pro-Israel. I mean, he's the one who sort of buys into the Zionist view of what Israel should be, wanting to even move, as you remember, the US consulate to Jerusalem. So this man has a different... My worry actually with Trump is that I remember interviewing Pompeo, his Secretary of State, when he came here. And in the interview, he went after China on Indian soil in the most impolitic way.
Yeah.
And I remember that the joint statement, when it was issued, when Trump had come, was a little more sort of sober in the way China was referenced, if you remember. No names were taken, etc. So I was a bit shocked by this complete disconnect. My worry is if Trump, to try and boost his sort of credentials, nationalistic credentials, goes hammers and tongs against China, it'll be a worry. The second problem with him is tariffs. He's going to definitely ramp up tariffs. And that's going to have a horrible impact on us. I was reading Shaktikanta Das's interview to CNBC TV 18, where that's the biggest fear right now. A Trump presidency would mean 3 or 4 things economically, which will have a cascading effect on what is known as the global south.
But let me ask you,
add a point here. A lot of what Trump says does not always reflect in his policy on the same scale. For instance, with Israel, while he is completely, in Netanyahu's camp, he is the one who got the Abraham Accords done, right?
Yeah.
And even with the North Koreans, he said rocket man and crazy, and my button is bigger than his, and it works. And then he went and had 2 summits with him. So he
no, somewhere is Trump the hardcore businessman? Does he realize that economics actually works, and let's try and get working, let's try and do business with each other rather than fight wars? He may talk a lot in hyperbole, but I'm just asking.
Very quickly, just to wrap out of that, I just feel that I don't want a situation where a transactional president like Trump dealing with India asks us to choose positions.
PM Modi said that this is not the era for war. No nation, no continent, nobody can actually afford war in the long time because it hurts both. Everyone
didn't start a war, but he didn't end one either. It was Biden who ended
He was the first one who said that we need to get out of Afghanistan.
That's true.
So
but
he was the one, he said,
and
he cleared the grounds for it, and Biden made a hash of America getting out of Afghanistan, however it was.
At least he pulled out.
I'm just asking you, do you see a change in his outlook in terms of the way he may be brash, he may be whatever it is to his constituency, he knows how to play that game. But in terms of an acumen, in terms of thought process, let's assume that he's got his nose ahead in this and he's going to be back in the White House. Do you believe that his policy, his economic policy, his outlook, geopolitical outlook has evolved, or perhaps there is a better set of advisors who's sitting next to him or telling him this is how you need to play this game?
In fact, it's the contrary.
It's the contrary.
I think he might be beset with worse advisors.
Worse advisors. Okay.
I don't think the current crop, compare with a John Kelly or a Mark Miley, because those were decorated 4-star generals. Look, the most consequential thing for him immediately after he becomes president, if he becomes president, is to try and end the 2 wars. On the Ukraine war, he has said, you could call it, bravado or whatever, campaign bluster, that he will end it in 24 hours. Now, how he's going to do that, we don't know. He can cut off American funding, but that's not going to sell. Forget about the Ukrainians. That's not going to sell in London or in Paris or in Berlin. So you might see the Europeans getting invested more in the Ukraine war. On the Israel war, I think I agree with Rahul. The way Netanyahu sees it, if it's a Trump White House, he's going to go for the kill. I wouldn't be surprised if he puts a hit out on Khamenei. He will want to use this as an opportunity, as a license to completely go for the kill. Whereas if it's a Harris presidency, I think she will put more pressure on Netanyahu. On the Ukraine front, I think it'll be a continuation of the Biden policy.
See, because this Ukraine, this backing Ukraine without arriving at a solution. See, if you continue this war, the only nation that's going to bleed physically is Ukraine. The nations that are going to bleed economically include Ukraine, Russia, America, all of Europe. Now, Europe is still buying its oil. Now, today's data also shows Europe is the 2nd largest buyer or exporter or importer of oil from India, finished. And where is the oil coming from, which India is processing, sending? It's coming via Russia. It's coming from Russia.
The Ukraine war is being viewed as an existential thing in Europe. In Europe, and the facts don't bear itself out, but the way it was framed is it's the first war on continental Europe, which was an existential threat to an existing member of the European Union. So they've painted this whole thing that if you don't stop Putin now, next is going to be, Poland.
No, see, that's the narrative. That's the narrative the Europeans are building. Now, if Trump comes back, and there may be, I don't know, bear me out on this, is there a constituency back in America which says that if Europe wants to fight a war against Russia, let them fight it? Why is America bankrolling it?
Trump's constituency.
So there is Trump's constituency, which very strongly believes that way. And they are saying, let us first get economically, feel the prosperity in our own pockets. Let us first feel a better life. That was his whole MAGA pitch in the first place. But when it comes to the outlook to India, do you believe there will be a difference? How do you see a Trump regime coming and affecting India directly, other than outside of tariffs?
For India, I don't think there's a lot of difference between a Trump or a Kamala Harris.
Because you guys are going to the US, so I'm just going to ask you, what is the perspective that you are going to actually look for from there when you bring back to the viewers, the constituency back home here?
What is the perspective we look? We look at the election per se. You know, what it means for India is one part of what we're going to be covering. I think Zaka would agree that this is an election that has consequences for the whole world, including for the United States. And that is going to be a focus. If you talk to people in South Bloc here in India, they've worked with both dispensations. Kamala Harris will be more of what Biden did, and we worked with the Democrats. And historically, I think India's worked better with the Democrats. But in terms of political alignment, I think a lot of people felt that Trump was a better leader to have in Washington DC for New Delhi. I think because of his populist pitch, he resonated with more people. But in terms of policy, I don't think that he was necessarily better or worse than the Democrats. I mean, in the middle of COVID, he threatened us and said that you should send HCQ to us, and he speaks out of turn a lot of times, and he thinks that only on the basis of his personal charisma and pull of his personality, he can get things done. That's not how geopolitics works. That is not how long-term policies work, and countries are going to be looking at America differently if you don't know what's in India. No matter who is in power, our foreign policy trajectory more or less remains the same. Some people may invest more in a particular country, some may less, but we don't overnight say that, okay, tomorrow onwards we are not friends or we are going to discontinue this policy. We don't do that. That policy continuity stays. That cannot be said of an America anymore, and that is a big problem that the Americans should reflect on, because how is the world going to trust you if you
don't have a policy continuity? You agree with that?
You remember this whole thing about Harley Davidson. He went on and on about Harley Davidson, and finally what came? Nothing really came of it. And by the way, what he's saying, I don't know if he'll follow through on what he's threatening to do on day one in office, which is 20% tariffs on all imports. So even Indian imports, not just on China. It's 20% tariffs on everything that's being imported into the United States. That will upend global trading in a way that God knows. I mean, last we saw during COVID.
The market. I mean, India's products will be uncompetitive, and that is after China, really our biggest. I mean, it is the biggest export market for Indian goods.
And the thing is, if the US is going to put this import tariff, what's stopping other countries from doing
so? But you know, here is a topic for an article that I was about to write, and this sums up what you were going to say. That India and US strategic objectives are not congruent at all in India's sphere of influence, which is Asia.
Correct.
And that's my worry. Fundamentally, whether it is Trump, whether it is Miss Harris, whoever comes in, phenomenally we are going to grow apart. Fundamentally, we're going to grow apart.
You mean India and the US?
Yes, our objectives are not congruent. Look, we want to be the leader of the global South. We are vying for that post with China. Right? The Chinese have a different worldview. We are the only ones that have actually, out of all these so-called antagonists, the longest border with China. We can't have China in this antagonistic sort of interplay with New Delhi. We can't have Beijing and New Delhi in this, and that's why you're seeing a bit of a thaw right now. There will come Mr. Biden, Mr. Trump, or even Miss Kamala Harris, G'd up, with a mandate. And China is very much a conversation. If you heard the Joe Rogan, interview, China was there, in the room. So my point is, they will also want a fracture as we go beyond, and this was articulated by the Russian ambassador in the last line. He says, tomorrow, you could be sanctioned for doing business with us. They don't want you to be doing business with Russia either. So America is all about us, right? Now, the point is, how do we
I think that aspect was...
How do we keep playing this balancing game between these three? And
we will have to play that balance.
I know we have
to.
But
the reason being,
what she was saying, that in this sort of what is going to be a little more of a tricky international order, I would rather have someone like Harris and the Democrats in than a mercurial character like Trump.
My point is that if you're a nation
with
that
all
is growing, if you're a nation that is growing, if you're a nation that is growing, this is something that you got to accept. If you're a nation that is growing, if you're a nation that is poised to become the third largest GDP.
You're not getting my point. I'm not disputing that at all.
At this point, how are you saying that China is not going to get us whatever it is? Even if we say we are going to make peace with the Chinese and we're going to stop.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying
in
that
Canada they were out to get us.
No, I fundamentally disagree with Rahul's
we have apples
thesis
to balance
that
every nation has. They will ensure
Indian and American strategic objectives are not divergent. I think they are very much convergent, and I'll tell you why. Look, let's be very clear, the Chinese want to dominate the emerging world order. They don't like the existing world order led by the United States and its Western partners. They want to upend that. Now they realize that it'll take some time before they do that. They look around this region. You look at, they've got disputes with the Philippines, they've got disputes with Taiwan, of course, is a huge dispute. It's an existential thing for the Chinese. Disputes with Indonesia, Malaysia, India, the entire, littoral countries here. The point is that ultimately, if all of those countries come together, many of them democracies, that's the only way to take on China. And if you have the United States, and I'm not saying their interests are benign or they're doing this for great otherworldly reasons, they're doing it for their own strategic interests. The fact is that you need a free, open Indo-Pacific. 30% of the world's trade goes through this channel, and the Chinese want to control that. They want to control that Indo-Pacific channel of trade and commerce to the detriment of the others in this region. And India's lot would be served best if we are with the lot of the other countries, not with China. I don't think we...
I don't think we can be either with China or with the Americans. I think the Americans...
need to be our own.
Yeah, we need to be our own. We have no other choice.
Have always had this policy of keeping India in play, but also keeping India in check. And they would want to keep India in check. And while India is an emerging power, it is not there yet that you pick a fight with a China and with an America and with Europe and then...
My worry is that they might... be overbearing and try to look. Why are we seeing? Let me just finish. 30 seconds. Why do we see instability in Afghanistan? Who walked out of there? Who is coming? Right, Bangladesh. If it was all about securing India's interests and securing democracy, Americans wouldn't have taken these decisions. Myanmar. Why is it such a? Why is it such a problem? Because of American interference there. There's Chinese play, there's American interference.
Look at all the other countries, Nepal, Sri Lanka,
they are doing it everywhere. They will
it's not the Americans who are doing regime change there.
I think we're saying the same thing. In fact, you've leapt 3 steps ahead by saying no.
I'm always 3 steps ahead of you.
I actually fundamentally believe that India is trying to chart an independent course for itself. I feel that the Americans are not going to give you, as we go forward, let me finish, give you that option. That's what I'm saying.
What I'm trying to say is, be it America, be it China, nobody's going to give us that option. We've got to figure out our way. Right. My only hope is that just like we figured out a way to buy oil from Russia and sell it to the Europeans and still make money in the pot and keep the Americans quiet on this, we should be able to figure out a way, and we will have to navigate. At the end of the day, the whole thought process is between the two administrations. We've seen 4 years of Trump, we've seen 4 years of Biden administration. Where has the Indo-US relationships grown, or has there been a continuity? And who's the one who's come back and tried to stab us in the back, or like you said, allow you, keep you in the game, but also make sure that you're limited and then you're stifled somewhere else. So if that's going to be the American policy, then we'll have to figure out our own policy.
4 years back, when Trump was in power, his basic game was, I'm not a transatlantist and neither am I the global cop. I want to pull the
he'll become more isolationist.
I want to pull the Navy out of Indo-Pacific. That was his long-term interest, because I want that resource to be spent on American people. If he starts drawing down, the bridge, so to speak, to the world, we've got a fundamental problem. They don't care about you, neither do the Chinese. All I'm saying is that I feel that with someone like Kamala Harris and a legacy of, foreign policy knowns who are going to be sort of engaging and interlocuting and advising her, we will perhaps have a little more breathing space with Trump and the unknown people who are going to work with him, because I don't think anyone that has any credibility wants to work with Trump. We don't know what we're in for. That's all I'm saying.
So
they're leaning
at the highest attrition rate as well. But I just want to add here that for all the people who are watching this, and for all the people in India who seem so invested in this election, one thing should be absolutely clear: whoever the Americans vote will be the president of America, and they will first of all secure American interests, not Indian interests, and that should be very, very clear. So as long as our interests align, they will work with us. When they don't, then they will give money to the Pakistanis and
True, they'll continue to do that. But ladies and gentlemen, the whole idea of this conversation was to just give you a short glimpse on what else to expect and how these dynamics will change, which way the ball will roll, and then eventually how the domino rolls. There will be different consequences. We ourselves, like Palki said, have to be focused on what we want to achieve, where we want to get, and how we're going to get there. Gents and the lady, thank you very, very much. All the very best in your coverage, and you've got to stay with us here on the News 18 network to watch the entire US presidential elections coverage here on the News 18 network. Bye for now.
एकता दिवस पर सभी देशवासियों को बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। साथियों, इस बार का राष्ट्रीय एकता दिवस अद्भुत संयोग लेकर आया है। एक तरफ आज हम एकता का उत्सव मना रहे हैं, वहीं दूसरी तरफ दीपावली का भी पावन पर्व है। दीपावली दीपों के माध्यम से पूरे देश को जोड़ती है, पूरे देश को प्रकाशमय कर देती है। और अब तो दीपावली का पर्व भारत को दुनिया से भी जोड़ रहा है। अनेक देशों में इसे राष्ट्रीय उत्सव की तरह मनाया जा रहा है। मैं देश और दुनिया में बसे सभी भारतीयों को, भारत के शुभचिंतकों को दीपावली की अनेक अनेक शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। साथियों, इस बार का एकता दिवस एक और वजह से भी विशेष है। आज से सरदार पटेल का 150वां जन्म जयंती वर्ष शुरू हो रहा है। आने वाले 2 वर्षों तक देश सरदार पटेल की 150वीं जन्म जयंती का उत्सव मनाएगा। ये भारत के प्रति उनके असाधारण योगदान के प्रति देशवासियों की कार्यांजलि है। 2 वर्ष का ये उत्सव एक भारत श्रेष्ठ भारत के हमारे संकल्प को मजबूत करेगा। ये अवसर हमें सीख देगा कि असंभव से दिखने वाले काम को भी संभव बनाया जा सकता है। जब भारत को आजादी मिली थी तो दुनिया में आज पीएम किसान सम्मान निधि सबको मिलती है तो सबको बिना भेदभाव मिलती है। आज पीएम आवास के घर मिलते हैं तो सबको बिना भेदभाव मिलते हैं। आज आयुष्मान योजना का लाभ मिलता है तो बिना भेदभाव हर पात्र व्यक्ति को इसका फायदा होता है। सरकार की इस अप्रोच ने समाज में, लोगों में दशकों से व्याप्त असंतोष को समाप्त किया है। इस वजह से लोगों का सरकार पर भरोसा बढ़ा है, देश की व्यवस्थाओं पर भरोसा बढ़ा है। विकास और विश्वास की यही एकता एक भारत श्रेष्ठ भारत के निर्माण को गति देती है। और मुझे पूरा विश्वास है, हमारी हर योजना में, हमारी हर नीति में और हमारी नीयत में एकता हमारी प्राण शक्ति है। इसे देख करके, सुन करके सरदार साहब की आत्मा जहां भी होगी, हमें अवश्य आशीर्वाद देती होगी। साथियों, पूज्य बापू महात्मा गांधी कहा करते थे, विविधता में एकता को जीने के हमारे सामर्थ्य की निरंतर परीक्षा होगी। गांधी जी ने कहा था और आगे कहा था, इस परीक्षा को हमें हर हाल में पास करते रहना है। बीते 10 साल में भारत ने विविधता में एकता को जीने के हर प्रयास में सफलता पाई है। सरकार ने अपनी नीतियों और निर्णयों में एक भारत की भावना को लगातार मजबूत किया है। आज वन नेशन वन आइडेंटिटी यानी आधार की सफलता हम सब देख रहे हैं और दुनिया इसकी चर्चा भी करती है। पहले भारत में अलग अलग टैक्स सिस्टम थे। हमने वन नेशन वन टैक्स सिस्टम जीएसटी बनाया। हमने वन नेशन वन पावर ग्रिड से देश के पावर सेक्टर को मजबूत किया। वरना एक वक्त था, कहीं बिजली तो होती थी, कहीं अंधेरा होता था, लेकिन बिजली पहुंचाने के लिए ग्रिड टुकड़ों में बटी पड़ी थी। हमने वन नेशन वन ग्रिड इस संकल्प को पूरा किया। हमने वन नेशन वन राशन कार्ड से गरीबों को मिलने वाली सुविधाओं को एक साथ जोड़ दिया, एकीकृत किया। हमने आयुष्मान भारत के रूप में वन नेशन वन हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस की सुविधा देश के जन जन को दी है। साथियों, एकता के हमारे इन प्रयासों के तहत ही अब हम वन नेशन वन इलेक्शन पर काम कर रहे हैं, जो भारत के लोकतंत्र को मजबूती देगा, जो भारत के संसाधनों का ऑप्टिमम आउटकम देगा और देश विकसित भारत के सपने को पार करने में और नई गति